You guys are really kind. Like at the end of the day, there were a group of people that recognized that they were going to suffer severe economic harm, and they decided to talk a whole bunch of other people into seceding from the country, and then they lost. I don't understand what are we talking about? Like, what is there to be proud about?
Exactly.
You were greedy and you lost.
All right, welcome to Good Guys Getting Better. I'm Christian Hanley.
I'm Aleem Boatwright.
And I'm John Borden.
We're back after the holidays, and right now we're about to, what are we now? A week out, roughly, from the Iowa caucuses.
All right.
Right now. Yeah, and it's kind of nuts. I don't know if you guys have been following it, but it seems like Trump is the well, not seems he's far and away the favorite, and right now just the fight between Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis for second place. But I mean, what do you all think? I was kind of watching some recaps of prior Iowa caucuses before recording this pod, and they're talking about just how in years past there's been so much prognosticating. Everyone thinks they know who's going to win going into it, and then of course the caucuses are not a formal election, right? It's like a small fraction of people who actually show up and make it make or break, who's going to win the caucuses. And this year, I think they're predicting it's going to be the coldest on record, something like single digits wind and snow, so potentially low turnout. But I don't know. What do you all think? Is it a definite Trump win, or is this all just kind of a foregone conclusion?
Well, it's funny. I'm looking at some news here. I think my general take is that there's going to be an extreme amount of Trump fatigue in the over the next year. And I think you start to see it. I mean, even Kim Reynolds, who I believe is the governor of Iowa, is not endorsing Trump in the Iowa caucuses. Like I think generally speaking, the kind of this slow exodus from Trump, which started, I think, with Rupert Murdoch, a couple of years ago, and being a little bit more critical with him, and really just kind of hard to support what he is saying, even for those that have supported him in the past. From a media perspective, I just think people are tired. Like I think the reality is that with the exception of winning the Electoral College in the 2016 election, like he hasn't done a whole lot of winning in a really long time. And I'm not saying that to be funny. I think that is what it is. And I think there's a real concern that, he's going to be holding together to win the election, and and on top of that, like he's got to stay on the ballots.
Right.
Like, I know, like we're talking as if this is anything but normal. Like I think he's off the ballot in 2 states.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
so not to mention like the 100 indictments.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the caucuses themselves. I mean, I don't think they're ever really a foregone conclusion. I had a friend who just a few years out of college, he caucused. He was a Republican. He caucused for Obama in 2008, and that was impressive. A shift in his politics, but that just tells you what the opportunity it is, what opportunity sort of exists in a political sphere at a caucus for things to happen that are very unusual. I guess because of that, it's not a foregone conclusion. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. It's anticipated to happen because that's the state of the Republican Party right now, right? And just he's and he carries the day, and then have Nikki Haley being sort of cornered into her hypocritical positions that she's held over the years. People are finally understanding that. Wait a second, she's really not ready. So
I mean, her answer in New Hampshire about the Civil War, that was wild.
Talk about it. Let's go right to that one.
I mean, like, you think about it, like, first of all, I'll take a step back. Let me give her a little bit of credit. This is the same former governor of South Carolina, who did take down the Confederate battle flag from state properties from the state house. So, kudos to her for that.
Although her explanation for how that happened was pretty fascinating. I listened to her today on that, and it was funny. But go ahead, we'll come back to that.
Well, but what I was going to say is what happened in New Hampshire was somebody asked her about the causes of the Civil War, and she went off on this weird tangent about the limits on government power and what freedom means. Mm-hmm. And the best thing was the same person in the crowd who actually asked the question. She turned it around on him and went like, "Well, what do you think the cause of the Civil War was?" He literally just like doesn't miss a beat and goes, "Well, I'm not running for president. I want to hear what you think." But I'm like we don't have national elections in this country. We have state by state elections that determine who the president will be. And you are supposed to know, as someone running for that office, or at least your team is supposed to know, the differences in the different states and the makeup of the electorates. New Hampshire is, when you're going for even Republican voters, it's an open primary state. People cross across party lines all the time. And you've got a huge independent streak. And even at the end of the day, if you're talking about Republicans or more conservative leaning independents, it's still a New England state. Like, what made you think you needed to split the difference there or pander to Confederate sympathizers in New Hampshire?
Staying true to her training. She was trained well by the racists in South Carolina. Listen, this is what happened. So
I guess
she even just I forget what day it was, but she went on to talk about the Confederate flag situation. She was like, "Well, I had half the state who believed that the flag meant pride, and other half that the state that believed that the flag meant racism and secession." Mm-hmm. It only meant racism and secession. So if you owed it to your state constituents to recognize that, yes, there were half people who were wrong and half people who were right. Mm-hmm. Don't pretend they're both right, So, and that's the problem, is that she has no courage in that respect, because she doesn't even have
none
now. Like now, she's just now she's just continuing her training, right? So it's like a reflex.
You gotta love that whole argument about the idea about it being heritage. I mean, have you seen that meme that makes the rounds? It's made the rounds a few times, of like things that have lasted longer than the Confederacy, and it's like it's just a list of ridiculous things, like the McRib, the Star Wars franchise, like all these things. Like the Confederacy lasted for something like, I don't know, 52 months all in, something like that. Like it's not.
Like, how are you going to pretend as though this great like, the rebel that tried to destroy the country and enslave people? And somebody, you gotta have in that, right? That's pride. That's a shame. Like that was a moment of shame for our country and for even the people, states that were part of it. But yet we want to pretend it's something to people.
Yeah. You guys are really kind. Like at the end of the day, there were a group of people that recognized that they were going to suffer severe economic harm, and they decided to talk a whole bunch of other people into seceding from the country, and then they lost. I don't understand what are we talking about? Like what is there to be proud about?
Exactly.
You were greedy and you lost. Like there isn't. What are we hearkening back to? To your point, we're talking about 52 months. Like we're talking about a couple of years. Like what Southern pride are we talking about? Where in the South are we talking about?
Exactly. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. There are things in the South you can be proud of. You can be proud of Dolly Parton, cornbread, smoky barbecue ribs. Fine. Hey, like absolutely. But that really.
No, so the bottom line, bringing it back to our friend Nikki, she's just not ready. Obviously anybody's more ready than Donald Trump, but I hate to draw that conclusion, because that's a false choice, right? But the reality is that we've already seen how not ready DeSantis is. So it is tragic that we are in this space where we're choosing a president with people who we would not choose to do any other job. Literally, no other job would I choose any of. I mean, Nikki Haley may have the intelligence to do several things. DeSantis and Trump just don't. Like, there's nothing I would choose them to do, and that's the peculiarity of politics. That and this is a good point. This is a good opportunity for me to interject the situation with Katt Williams. This is a fascinating. Watch this now. Watch this. So you guys haven't been as embroiled in this one as I have, because I've been watching it and having heated conversations with friends over this interview that Katt Williams had with Shannon Sharpe on his Club Shay Shay, his podcast. Hugely popular event. 35 million views in less than a week.
Dang.
Now, when he went, just for our audience who may not have seen this, who may be in the few percent who haven't heard about it, he went on, and I'm going to bring it back to politics. So stay with me. So he goes on the show.
We're listening.
He goes on the show, and basically he just begins to air grievances. Right? He talks about how other comedians have lied on him, other comedians have stolen jokes from him, and how they can't hold a candle to his talent, and this, that, and the third, and how they're part of a cabal, and how Ludacris is part of the Illuminati, and how Kevin Hart hasn't had a role in 5 years that he hasn't had an opportunity to turn down first, and when he asked to take shucking and jiving out of a script, Kevin Hart didn't, and then Kevin Hart got the role, and how Ricky Smiley lied when he said he got chosen for a certain role in Next Friday first, and then it was given to him later. He said everybody lied and all these men wearing dresses who are comedians, they're a disgrace, yet he plays a pimp and is proud of it. But he didn't say that part, neither did she. Now, I won't go into all the parts about how Shannon Sharpe has got a little bit of heat for being an extraordinarily bad interviewer, because he didn't challenge anything. Sat there and laughed. But he wasn't really, in Shannon Sharpe's defense, he wasn't really interviewing, he was just having a conversation. That's what he says.
Right.
But anyway, the bottom line is this. The response of the public in certain demographics to this interview was like, go Katt Williams, right? You are a truth sayer, right? You are turning this Hollywood on its head. Steve Harvey and Cedric the Entertainer and these guys and Kevin Hart, who are rich and they're part of this, part of Hollywood, and they did you wrong, and you tell it, Katt. This is the response, right? And I've seen this over and over again, and very few people had recognized the immense hypocrisy in his conversation. I'll just give you an example. He sat there and told people that they were liars, while at the same time he read 3,000 books a year from the ages of 8 to 12. Straight face. That wasn't a joke. That's 8 books a day. He sat there and told people, I can run, as we sit here right now, I can run a 4.16 40-yard dash.
What?
No lie. He sat there and talked
faster than Deion Sanders in his prime. Is that what he just said?
No, at that moment there, while he was sitting there, he started with 4.3. He said, to his credit,
right now, he could run faster than Deion Sanders in his prime.
In his prime, absolutely. That was his claim. And he started with 4.3. Then he said 4.16. He was serious. Now Shannon Sharpe, being a football player, he did hit on exit. He said, "Well, you run the subway, right? You run the subway. You ain't gonna run." You ain't gonna run. No, but he didn't even dig in on that. But he stuck to it. And he sat there and talked about the men wearing dresses and emasculating black men in film, and didn't even acknowledge his pimp roles that he does constantly. He sat there and talked about women not, wanting to be the alpha, and that being bad for relationships, and he just went on all of these different things and had all of this different hypocritical through lines to what he was saying, and all of these bombastic statements and wild things that he was saying. The man he's been to jail probably 20 times in the past 10 years as a celebrity, right? So it's not like, he's just, he said he ran away from home at the age of 10, and was on the street and all kinds of things and found it, was making, what did he say? He was making $2,000 a day or something crazy stealing car radios. I'm like, man, if you made that much stealing car radios, it'd probably be a bigger business. But the reality is that he had all these outlandish statements, but because what he said resonated with a group of people who felt the way he felt, it didn't matter how ridiculous it was, right? It didn't matter how absurd the things he was saying sounded. All that mattered to people was that he was hitting Hollywood because Hollywood is the bad guy to a certain class or certain group of people who look down on that kind of wealth. Now they don't look down on Elon Musk wealth. They don't look down on Rupert Murdoch wealth. They don't look down on all the other. They look down on Hollywood wealth for whatever the reason. That's what they've been trained over a certain number of years to do that. So even though he doesn't, his statements, ideology, and his core fan base doesn't really even overlap that well with a Donald Trump. What overlaps is the sensibilities of the listeners, right? They all want the same thing. They want to punish their enemy, right? They want to
it's owning libs.
Yeah, they want someone to speak out against their enemy.
Right.
Aggressively to their enemy. What struck me, and this is something in the urban community, a lot of times we talk about who's hating on who. Like somebody's hating on them and hating on them, right? This was the most obvious display of hate I've ever seen on TV. Right?
Talk about the urban community.
The urban community, right? This, well, I guess it has spread past the urban community. Well, now it goes out into the general
black community, man. Why did you just say the blacks?
The blacks. The blacks say that
speaking in code.
But the reality is that this was the biggest display of hate, somebody hating as I've ever seen. And I'm not even one to really use that term because I feel like it's people are somewhat it's like sometimes people are calling hate legitimate criticism, they're calling hate. But the reality is that he took he targeted guys who were more successful commercially than he is, and he started to come at them for their commercial success because he felt as though he should be sharing in that success in some way. And he was trying to make himself very relevant. It was kind of transparent. But nobody's calling that hate who wanted to hear what he had to say. They're calling the guys who are defending themselves against him, they're calling them the haters. It's like it's crazy. And it's the same concept. You have Donald Trump sitting up and talking about the one of the wealthiest robber barons you could find, right? Talking about manufacturing and how the Democrats aren't going to help you, while he does everything he can find to not pay people what they're worth, right? In every business he's been involved in, right? He'll sit up there and talk.
To have all his "Make America Great Again" hats made in China.
Made in China, exactly. All of his line of clothes that people he once had was made in China. Talking about black folks, what do you got to lose? While at the same time he didn't see fit to let us live in his homes in 1978. In 80 in his properties. But it's like hypocrisy is just people turn a blind eye to it and they believe what they want to believe. That's the bottom line with this, is that people will believe what they want to believe. It's just that simple. And I don't know what you do about that. Because what happens, they immediately stop listening to anything that doesn't align with what they want to believe. And so once you cut that off, you cut off the truth, and you only want to listen to, okay, well, what's matching, what's on my timeline of social media that aligns with my thinking, then I'm good. It's sad. And it just for clarification, I'm not a big fan of Steve Harvey, Cedric the Entertainer, Ricky Smiley, or Katt Williams, to be honest with you. I didn't have a dog in the fight, as I say, but I did recognize that this is kind of fun.
So you were an undecided voter, basically. You were an undecided voter watching. This was your This is how we got from like the example of the Iowa caucuses and a snow squall and talking to a room full of white people in New Hampshire to a feud between Katt Williams. By the way, was the dig about men wearing dresses and was that what was that about? Was that about?
So
is that a Medea reference?
No, so like
he lumped Tyler Perry into that as well. So the idea is that
I was gonna say, have you seen Tyler Perry's house? I'll put on a muumuu to make that kind of money. Are you kidding me?
I mean, they're okay. So, and John, I don't know how much you've thought about this, and you jump in as well. But in our community, the emasculation of men, right, over the last 50 years, well, since we've been in this country, as you know, as indentured servants and as free men.
That's it. It wasn't that. It was worse.
It was worse than that.
Liam,
the thought is that there was a deliberate effort to make the man in our household less, and that that's well documented. And the concept is that comedians and actors have continued this tradition through their willingness to dress up as female characters and feminize themselves in a way, and present that to the public. So I think it's a concern rooted in fact that has gotten exaggerated because of the pain, frankly, and the grief over many decades. So there are a lot of people you'll see that say, "I'll never put on a dress on camera," right? I'll never play a woman, that type of thing. But at the same time, there's a long tradition of very successful Black comedians who played women characters. Going back to before Flip Wilson and Geraldine to Murphy and Martin Lawrence and a lot.
Right.
So that was that. It culminates in the Medea character, which a lot of the Black community has some issues with. John, you want to jump in on that? Just the thoughts on what?
Yeah, my only thought, not a strong opinion here. He's not the first person to express their frustration with this. I think what he might have been better served saying is that this shouldn't be a path to success. So I think the argument that people have made, I think Chappelle might have actually made this argument, but there was some comedian that, your path or actor, Black actor, that your role to success shouldn't be in putting on a dress. So like you've got limited archetypes that are available to Black men in Hollywood, and this is one of them. And then that's, I think, when you lump in, which, is obviously a very heterocentric position, but you lump in this idea that you are then emasculated once you get to Hollywood. Like the only way for you to reach prominence is emasculation. Mm. And it's like, you take away so many other things, you're also going to take away this little shred of dignity that I have. I don't think, I've heard a little bit about, this and Katt Williams. I know a lot of people are talking about it right now, but I don't think it's really compelling. I think it's ironic that he has so many issues with people stealing his material. And in fact, some of the things that I've heard are not his novel ideas at all.
No.
Mm-hmm. That's the great irony, so it's like, and assuming that, because people are successful, they're in the Illuminati. That is the quintessential Black trope. When all else fails.
Well, it's also where the conspiracy theory thing crosses over, much like the whole thing you were talking about a minute ago, Aleem, with just how if you got people you've got your captive audience who only want to hear your side of things.
Yeah.
Where the Venn diagram overlaps.
I'm gonna tell you one of my greatest fears when misinformation got the accelerator button pushed back when Donald Trump was elected, was like, yo, please don't give a microphone to the Black barbershop. And I know I'll probably get in some trouble for this, but man, you want to hear some real sloppy conspiracies, yo, fam, go sit in the barbershop, man. I'm not going to put this person on Front Street, but I used to, I think I told you guys the story before, but I used to have a barber, and he was cool.
Back when you needed one, or
back when I used to. Yeah, all right, man. I cut my own hair. Christian think he's slick because he was out here. He showed up to the birthday party this past weekend. And
Stop.
No, this hair, nothing. You know, look at his.
You brought it up, not me. I didn't bring up my hair at all. I just walked in out of the rainstorm.
He's like, I just walked out of the rain, and they were like angels singing, and it was like this angelic moment. He was radiating.
Yeah, totally.
Hair.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exactly how it happened, just like that.
But at any rate, so the reason I like this barber is because you get in, he's like, yo, he kept his appointments, he was timely, wasn't a lot of talking. We got in the chair. Everyone else would be talking about like ridiculous stuff, like, you know, whatever, like anything you could think of, like just mass information. Like the barbershop was just a collection space of mass information. But he never participated. I'm like, you know what? That's good, because I'm not talking. I don't want to talk. I want to get my haircut and go out. One day, for whatever reason, I don't know how Hillary Clinton came up, but it was the trigger of all triggers. And then he went on this tirade about how she was part of the Skull and Bones and how they all are. And she just on and on and on about how she was part of some secret cabal that was trying to rule the world. I couldn't believe this guy that had been so silent was so convinced that she was a part of a secret society at a school that she didn't go to, that only
right.
And I'm like, you know, and at that point I was like, yo, bro, like, appreciate the haircut. I got to go. And it was at that moment I started cutting my own hair. But at any rate, but the point is, it's like, you know, there is such like deep and historic like distrust, and I think that's where misinformation has this breeding ground. You know, like when you were the pain for so long, it's like, yo, this can't be real. Like you just start making up a fantasy, because the reality can just be so devastating and so oppressive. But Nikki,
or it's the fact that the world is so complicated and things are changing so fast they don't make sense anymore to a lot of people. I'm not saying that about any particular one phenomenon or going on in society, but what you want to talk about, you were talking a moment ago, Aleem, basically about the idea of gender roles and where that comes up against a certain tradition, fraught tradition in entertainment, but also much more broadly, things about technology, artificial intelligence, the economy. If things like that are just advancing so quickly that people can't really grapple with them, don't have time to process them, then having one cohesive story with an arc and a conclusion that ties it all together, I mean, that on some level is comforting for people. I mean, when you're not into it, that's not your way of doing things, and you hear it at the barbershop, it sounds insane. But I think that that's kind of where that emotional impulse to delve into those conspiracy theories comes from. It's comforting. It makes things make sense.
I want to go back to Haley for a second. So there was a couple of interesting stories about her this weekend, talking about making your own art. Some of it is just kind of like gossipy and chatty, but her basically renaming her husband. Did you read about this?
No.
So there was this story recently. I mean, it's definitely making the rounds. But basically, they met in college, and his first name is William.
Okay.
And up to that point in his life, he was known as William. And she said, you know what? What's your whole name? And his middle name is Michael. And she's like, you know what? You don't look like a William or a Bill. You're a Michael. So she just started calling him Michael, and that is what he has been since. Wow. All of his friends prior to like whatever was like his sophomore or junior year in high school, college rather, knew him as William. And now they're like, she's like, no, this is Michael. And she put it in her book apparently too. The issue, ironically enough, though,
that is weird.
It is weird. Like tangentially,
that is weird.
What do you guys think? This is a personal issue with me. I understand kind of like whitewashing your identity. Do you guys know what her first name is?
I used to. I know that she claimed in, I forget if something she had written or if she said it in a public appearance, but she claimed that she was white despite her ancestry, that somehow, for whatever reason, it's still qualified, it's still counted, or however she phrased it, as her being white. But remind me, what is her name again?
Her name is Nimarata Rendwa. Rendawa. Nimarata Rendawa. Of Punjabi descent, obviously first generation.
Is she fully Indian, or is there Her both her parents Indian?
Yes. And it's interesting because like Nikki Haley, you don't think twice about it.
Nope.
She presents it, but it's fascinating to me, the contortions, not just her, but the contortions, even people of color in the Republican Party, you have to make in order to justify and if not champion the things that are in front of you.
Yeah.
I think it's okay. I'd love to hear Republicans say, yeah, the Civil War was about slavery. Okay.
Well, ironically, I'm not sure if you heard how this party got started, but they used to be very clear on that point.
Well, and and it's funny, to your point, like you can't have it both ways. You can't be like, oh, well, it was the Democrats that, okay, fine, then are you anti-slavery? Are you anti-racist? You pick, you can't have it both ways. But anyway, someone like Nikki Haley who has to go into, and I can understand the reasons I think that people would be attracted to the Republican Party. I don't agree with them, but I understand it. It's basically this gilded road to wealth and privilege. And if you just ignore all the other stuff that is totally your interests, you can be rich, and that's all that matters. You just have to hate people that look like you. You have to actively work against their interests. You got to be comfortable lying to people's faces.
Yeah.
And if you're okay with that, and we're look, I'm not here to measure what's a big lie or a small lie, but some of the Republican lies are dumb. Hey man, mission accomplished with a big banner.
Trickle down economics. Yeah.
Yeah. You just come up like welfare queens.
Yeah.
Let's just come up with really obvious, easily disprovable lies. And it doesn't make a difference whether it's true or not. We just need to convince you that it's true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the approach, interestingly enough. And I think that people learned a lot from the Trump way, right? And that's literally what he did. And I watched it it felt like slow motion, right? Going back to 2015 and so forth. You hear he'll say something that's demonstrably untrue. And of course our media was a party to it, but nobody initially challenges him, and then he just repeats it over and over again. He ignores any criticisms or calls that, hey, that's not true, because that's never strong enough to overcome him. It over and over and over again. And once you say something over and over and over again, there are going to be people who believe you. Now with him, because he wanted him in the role he was in, there was that number of people who believed the lies grew and grew and grew, and then anything he said was not going to be a lie. It couldn't be a lie because it came from him. And
do you think
the psychology of that is so fascinating to me?
Do you think it's because people just don't like being confrontational?
No,
if
I don't.
We were,
I don't.
Here's what I'm thinking.
No,
here's what I'm thinking.
Finish the thought, though.
I'm talking about interviewing. Right now,
yeah.
I'd love to do an exercise where, without notice, you just make up a lie. As we're just doing the pod, you just make up a lie. And in real time, you think about, hey, man, was that true or not? You might not know the answer. And I think what Donald Trump realizes is that he can sell something that's partially true, that might be true, something that he deeply believes that you can't disarm in a short period of time. And then that gets just recycled, the way that the internet works, the way that the news media works. For example, and it doesn't have to be, we just talking about Katt Williams. Things that yo, fam, you read 3,000 books a year from the ages 8 to 12. You can. I mean, if you don't want to be confrontational, and I get you don't want to embarrass your guests. You want to keep the interview. You want to get your clicks. You want to get your views. Everyone's got the same issue. But it's okay, he's going to lie, and I think the news media is actually getting better with yo, man, that we're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. You just make up stuff.
Yeah.
And the same with some of these more extreme people. Ain't nobody putting a microphone in Marjorie Taylor Greene. As a matter of fact, people take the microphone away from her. I think I was in December. She would crash an interview, and they just yo, cut the interview, man. This is done. She's just trying to crash in and just yell stuff. And yo, come on, we know that you're lying and you know it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, yes about that, but also it's not like Trump didn't figure that out for himself, right? I mean that's been the techniques of propaganda for since it was invented, right? Like since mass media became a thing, and especially during World War II, but I mean in other instances too. But when you talk about just that repetition, that's how he turned himself from being an actual flesh and blood person into being just a brand, a walking, talking brand.
Sure.
I mean, if you talk about whatever, Burger King, Coca-Cola, whatever, I mean, you can't think about an entire sentence or paragraph about them. It's just you have like a certain thing that pops into mind. It's one word or one phrase and one color scheme and whatever. I mean, he's done that with himself.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the lying, yeah, it's and I know everyone hates the Nazi comparisons, but God damn it, he reads the books and the comparison is apt. But I mean, if you have a small lie where it's something where you can tell how it's a little bit different than what you know, you can kind of go like, hey, wait a minute, that's not quite accurate. If it's something so in your face that you don't even have time to like get into it, and then they bring up a second lie, then a third lie, and it becomes that onslaught of lies, it's exhausting. It's cognitively exhausting. And you don't, it isn't so much that the interviewer has to let them get away with it or want someone like Trump to get away with it. It's that you just can't keep up. It's that fire hydrant in your face. And that's what they know that's how it works. And that was my point about when we were talking offline before about Elise Stefanik, who's gone from being this educated and sort of at least publicly appearing moderate Republican to now being this Trump lackey who goes on Meet the Press yesterday, and all she does is just parrot his talking points about how the January 6th rioters who were in prison for their crimes for assault in the Capitol are prisoners or political prisoners in their own country. They're hostages, to use her word. I mean, just parroting those Trump fascist talking points. I mean, that's what it is. They know that it just burns you out. The conspiracy theories, the lying, the yelling, it's exhausting, and people just eventually relent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Funny, first off, I don't know if I compare Trump to a Nazi, but maybe Hitler.
Yeah.
I think he has aspirations to do the same. I'd be, I would do. I'm not saying that there aren't Nazi inclinations, but you've got Hitler, and then you've got like the organizational prowess of the Nazi Party, and I think that is where, like, if you're going to fight a battle on two fronts, like I think you need to hold him out as a Hitler.
Yeah.
Like he's not the first person to like hold it. I mean, like I think our founders would specifically try to protect and put guardrails in place to prevent someone exactly like this, questionable about how it was done. But then the party itself, like, look, if you want to go all the way back, like this is maybe the argument that you make for not having political parties in general. Like it can be this concentration of power. I mean, like you could even, for what it's worth, they seem more like the Communist Party in China. Like they are looking for a really closed group of people that make up the party that more or less have to pass a purity test to be in the party, and then they consolidate power, they have elections, and then they just basically cut everyone else off. Like it seems like they're more like that. I think Donald Trump certainly seems a lot more like, I mean, like almost like carbon copy like Hitler. But like the party itself, what concerns me, it's more like the Communist Party in China and less of the Nazi Party.
I think part of the reason that people have difficulty with the comparisons with Hitler and the Nazis is that it's almost like Donald Trump is the kinder, gentler Hitler, in that he's less intelligent, right? So he can't think and come up with strategy on how to screw people. He just does. He's all the surface part of Hitler, right? And
well, I think Hitler, what Donald Trump does is a lot like what Hitler does. Like it was these massive shows of, like these public
pageantry and ego.
All of it. He definitely intends to be, and to follow that model. People might not believe that, but it's pretty clear that that's the model. That's the closest political model he's finding.
Well, don't forget though that people look back on that time, the rise of fascism in Central Europe and World War II, knowing how the story ends. And then kind of the problem with knowing how the story ends is that in and of itself creates a certain amount of bias. If you actually look back at snapshots of how that descent into madness happened throughout the 1920s and 30s before we get to the end of the war, the Holocaust, the genocide, all of that, I'm talking 15 years prior.
Yeah.
You don't have 20 years prior, even more. You don't have this well-organized machine. You don't have this charismatic leader. You have this guy who was a failure, who had daddy issues. Sorry if this sounds very familiar. Who failed in his own initial career. He wanted to be an artist, Hitler, that is. He was not this brilliant tactician. He failed in his initial attempt to overthrow the Weimar Republic. It wasn't the fact that he was brilliant. It was the fact that he tapped into people's fears and anxieties, caused mass hysteria. And what made the entire system work, whether you're talking about the propaganda operation, the military operation, any of it, was not him himself. It was an entire team of people who were just as evil, but much more brilliant and behind the scenes. And Trump has dealt with having a mixture of loyalists like that around him and some people he could pass off as being quote unquote mainstream in his first administration, which of course he had turnover every couple of months.
Some people.
But this next go around, the only people he's going to have around him will be loyalists. And those are the people who are the most dangerous because they are the enablers. They are the ones who are going to make sure that while he is riling up the crowds and keeping that political strength going, that someone is handling the propaganda, someone's handling the law, someone's handling the military, someone's handling the economy. It's not going to be him.
So that's a good clarification. Thanks for that, Christian, because that's the important history that is often missed. And people focus on the mass murder conclusion of it, right?
Right. It didn't start that way.
Yeah, and there's no comparison to that, which is why people have the problem with the comparison so much, is because you don't have a present day comparison to a mass murder that ends in the killing of millions of people.
Well, and that's the problem, is that people say, well, he's not Hitler. It's like, well, right, but in 1928, Hitler wasn't Hitler. He wasn't Hitler until he was Hitler.
Exactly.
Like, look, it's really, I don't think it's that hard to, I'm going to go back to what I said. Like, you could also clearly make the comparison to the way that the Nazi Party rolled out its onslaught on humanity. I mean, like Donald Trump, kids in cages. Like, what are we talking about? Like that just happened. And it was not. It happened, and it was like widespread. Like, I know that maybe the inclination is to get caught up on like the sheer volume and the sheer magnitude of what he did, but you got to start somewhere, right? So, there's 100% that. And to your point, like post World War I, there was also this feeling in Germany of shame, like, and loss and regret.
Yep.
And, that can be a powerful thing. We just talked about, the emasculation in a community. And I'm not saying that, Germany is emasculated in the same way that we were just talking about, but I do think when you feel like something that's really dear to you is being taken away, if not violently taken away, that creates a void, like you want to fill it. And I think that's another thing he was able to do. Like, again, I don't know German, but I think it's a great historical irony that Donald Trump has chosen make America great again. Like, again, if you want to start looking at Hitler, I think it was the same thing again. Like, this will be another great country again. And like, we will rise from the ashes of our humiliation, and
have a 1,000-year Reich.
Exactly. So like, again, I don't think Donald Trump I don't even think he's good at lying. Like, at least, at least there was some decorum in lying, with his predecessors. And I thought George Bush was a bad liar. But like Donald Trump,
was.
I think it's a combination of impulse control. I think it's driven by something that is clearly and nakedly like his self-interest.
Well, but
I don't even think he recognizes that he's acting in the same way that Hitler did.
I
wouldn't give him that credit. I don't think he's that. I just don't think I don't give him that credit.
This might be another good segue, but I feel like with everything with Trump, and we've really started to grade on a curve. We went from Obama, who really literally had to be incredible at everything, right? And, the way he would present ideas, the way he would articulate. I mean, he had his quirks in speech, but they were all for the purpose of almost delivering a perfect statement. You know, it was like he had to do that in order to be accepted, right?
Yeah.
Donald Trump absolutely none of those standards. People accept whatever he says and tries to make it acceptable on that level. I have never heard him give a speech that would even been acceptable in a junior high school. Like literally.
No.
The level of sophistication in his language, his cadence, I mean his sentence structure, they're all just bad. But for some reason,
well, he can't finish a single thought. He doesn't finish a thought. He just meanders. It's just the entire thing is a 2-hour-long run-on sentence.
Exactly. So how did we go from Obama having to be way up here to Trump that nobody cares? Like that is. And it goes back.
Oh, I think you know the answer to that one. I think you do.
I don't know if you're keeping count, Christian. That's like number 3.
That's number 3 at least. That's number 3 at least.
And then he said the indentured servants. Like, yo, what are we doing, Aleem? What are we doing?
Well, that's my point. I'm trying to let our audience draw these conclusions without me telling them. That's the whole point. The bottom line is that, you know, I feel like it goes back to the point I was making earlier in that we accept when we find what we want, it doesn't really matter when it has what we don't want associated with it. We strip all that off and ignore it, right? He's saying things or he's making points that resonate with me, so I don't care if he's an idiot. I'm just gonna latch onto it. He's got and everybody like me is latching onto it, so we're all in it together. Yeah, he talks like a 6th grader. Fine. Yeah, he does things that a 13-year-old would do. Fine. But the bottom line is, I think, you know, and I guess the segue point, I think this might be a bit of a controversial topic. Was the other video I sent you guys earlier? Yeah, you remember anybody jump in on?
Yeah.
Just the thought. I don't know.
So my immediate thought so first off, I looked at the list, and for our listeners and for our viewers, there was a post, and a teacher, I don't know if it was a woman, a teacher had given a list of phrases and words that were not acceptable or that she wouldn't use in the classroom. And, you know, stuff like you couldn't say like bruh or bro.
Yeah.
You know, or a variety of different, no cap. You know, like you know, that slaps. Like there's a variety of different phrases. And as I read her intro and then I read the list, the thing that stood out to me, and this is even before I listened to the video, I can't think of the woman's name, but I'm familiar with.
She's psychologist, has a psychologist. Channel. Yep.
She is incredibly, you know, thoughtful and intelligent, intellectually rigorous, but also entertaining. I mean, she's created content for the internet, so it's a combination effect. But anyway, the thing that was interesting to me was that the teacher was trying to say, like, you guys aren't speaking proper English, and basically, and no one talks like that. And as I was reading, there's an element where I can understand, like, oh, okay, like you want to make sure that you have a command of the language. But where this person falls short, in my opinion, is that the purpose of language is communication. Right? You know, so you aren't, you know, the purposes of language isn't to be perfect at speaking it. The purpose of language is to be able to communicate ideas to the person that you're talking to with words and really in just sounds. So and then I started listening to the video, and then that's when you start to layer in, like, you know, a lot of the slang is rooted in hip hop culture, is rooted in Black culture, is formulated from places where there is an absence of information. So I definitely, in my personal life, like I want to know the English language in the same way that I want to know Arabic, in the same way that, you know, I want to learn French. Like I want to learn the language bit, I want to learn it to communicate, not because I want to be able to say, like, I speak flawless Arabic, like Fusa, or Parisian French, or the King's English. Like, I don't care about that. The whole point is communication. Now, to give credit, I had a professor in college, Dr. Chiji Ikoma. His thing was communication is a dance. And it is unique to your partner. So if that is the language, if that's what you need to use to communicate your ideas, that's what you use. Like, what good is knowing perfectly inside and out the English language if the person that you're speaking to has no idea what you're talking about. So I'm totally with her. And then you obviously layer on the colonialism, you layer on the racism, like all of these things that are creations to make people feel like they're inferior. And then what I love that she said is that then you start to work in reverse of what the goal of the classroom is. Students feel like they're not heard, and when they're not heard, they're less likely to contribute. They're more likely to tune out. And then you encourage the cycle. I actually love, there's so many content creators that seem to have this wonderful awareness, like, okay, I can do it, but I'm not. As a matter of fact, I'm going to actively not do it. I'm going to actively use whatever I feel like, whatever words are at my disposal to communicate to the people that I want to talk to. I don't need to talk a certain way just because I need to demonstrate how great my English is.
Sure. So I'm curious, Christian, what are your thoughts on that? Because this one gets a little complicated for me. I find myself differing, in my opinion, from a lot of people who I usually would align with on most other things, and it's possibly because of how I have maybe been raised, and because of how I have a certain appreciation for language. But I first of all, let me just say I align myself with what John said, but at the same time, I feel like there is space for this type of thing, for a teacher to do this type of thing. But I wanted
to agree. I just think it was flawed.
It was flawed. And again, we don't know the details on how she executed it either. But at the same time, if she had embraced culture before having something like this, let me just start from this standpoint. If you're in a class to learn a foreign language, and I know, Christian, you speak French fluently, so in a class that you're teaching, that you're learning French in, some French professors might say, you're not speaking English in my class because you're learning French, right? So
yes, that happened to me. I got kicked out.
Absolutely, and I had trouble with that, which is why I didn't ever learn French.
Yeah.
But the reality is that the same thing can be said of this type of dynamic. If you're in an English class, I don't want you using slang English. I want you to use the English I'm teaching you, right? And leave this class, as long as you learn the lessons that I was teaching in the class, you can do whatever you want. Is whatever is most effective to communicate. To John's point, that's the purpose of language, right? To communicate. So my issue is that what I've seen, just anecdotally, is that a lot of kids are at an age where I would expect them to have better understanding of the English language. They have no idea. Like, they couldn't tell you what even a predicate is in many cases, or let alone some of the more complex instruments of our language. Like, it's like they don't learn language. They don't learn the English in the technical sense. They just learn it in almost the written sense, which, and writers can write it right? They take artistic license all the time. But as far as understanding the base, here are the fundamentals of our language. That seems like it's being lost. That's concerning to me. So I fully endorse culture and slang. In fact, I have a certain affection for hearing certain slangs and how slang differs from region to region and all that. But you have to realize that it's all rooted in something, right? And let's learn base first.
And let me just read an excerpt from this, because there is some validity to the point that she's making. And just when you thinks that you can make when I think she could actually, there's space to make an argument, because what I will agree for is structure. Her issue isn't grammar. Her issue is word choice.
Yes.
And so she says, more often than not, the way you speak is the way you will write. I'm with that. Like, your grammar and construction is a part of communication. I get it. But then she goes on to say,
we should link in the notes, Christian, probably.
What'd you say?
We should link in the notes.
Oh yeah.
The gibberish. Then she goes on to say, the gibberish some of you choose to use is improper English and sometimes inappropriate for an academic setting. This is an education.
Okay, pause right there. Not to interrupt, but that right there is an example where. Sorry, there's a really bad echo. Let's see. Getting a bad echo here. But that right there is an example of where this teacher is going too far. Not just too far, this person is deliberately demeaning their students. This is not education. This is a teacher taking a dig at students who they know do not come from the same background as themselves, right? Because if it were something like "do not swear in my class," "do not use abusive language in my class," when writing, abide by certain grammatical rules, right? That would be one thing. But to say you use right there, you're insulting children and saying that they are somehow inferior. Like, so sorry to interrupt, but that I couldn't let that go.
I'm going to quickly read through some of the list too. Bruh.
Yeah.
Standing on business. SOB. Ooey ski ye. Y'all ate that up. That's Katt. What's up, gang? Bet. Oh my God, Miss T.
The tone
God, this sounds like my 8-year-old.
On my normal. On my dead. Riz. What's up, G Wade? In the cut with my twin. That's 5. Yeah. On bro. On hood. Gang. Nigga. On me. On the set. Freak you mean. Period. Mignon. Big dog. I mean, look, as you guys know, I was a substitute teacher for a bit of time, and I understand that there is an element of you are taking the lazy way out in communicating, but slang is a part of how language evolves. Like, I'm no etymologist, but I can imagine if you can look at the way that the English, I mean, you could just pick a word and type an etymology of, you pick your word and you can see how the word has evolved over time, its usage. Like that.
Well, right now, you are using a word that originated as slang that no longer is slang, but is the word slang that you're using to describe slang.
Yeah.
Which is that word street language, right? So that by itself was at a time something that was informal, that was colloquial. It was two words mushed together to describe a phenomenon of how people on the street would talk. Now we in everyday English use that neologism, that newly created word of two words mushed together to describe that phenomenon, that subsection of spoken English. And that happens all the time. Every single day we're using words that 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, at those times were, one could argue, slang. They were everyday words and expression used by the common people that the upper class, the educated, would not have used, but then over time were then adopted and became part of the vernacular.
Yeah. I'm actually more for the control of the technical aspects of the language. So you can, to me, substitute whatever noun or verb or adjective or adverb that you want. I just want it to be used right. I want people to understand its usage and how English has been designed over the centuries, right? And just to better understand how you're forming your ideas and thoughts, how you're presenting them, so that they make sense. And then you can mix words. Really, to me, big words versus little words doesn't really matter, but it's how and when you use them, right? And you can use them very strategically. I mean, I think we've all dabbled in code switching. I mean, we've had that mentality. I mean, we've grown up in different spaces. But we understand. But to understand what is the most effective way to structure a sentence is important to me.
Well, so you asked me about foreign language learning, and I'll tell you this: the thing that we were always taught was, if you want to be a great writer or great anything, you need to first learn the rules to then learn how you want to break them.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that. Then in terms of the use of slang in writing, or even vulgarities, swear words, whatever, separate and apart from this in English class, what we always learned was it depends on the context. In that case, context is everything. If you are writing a sentence, you're writing some narrative, and you're saying like, it was a nice fucking day outside, like that's not appropriate. But if you have a quote, you have a quote where it's the characters in your story that you're writing, and they're engaged in a fight. It's a hyper realistic scene, and they lose their temper, and okay, fine. But I think that the bigger picture, the bigger issue, sorry, that's going on and what we're talking about, and the instance that gave rise to this video going out was the fact that this teacher didn't set guidelines for everyone to get on board with, and did not make a plea for students to learn more formal English alongside what they were bringing into the classroom to contribute. What he did was intentionally degrade and put down these kids and make them feel less than. And to the content creator's point, whose name I am blanking on right now.
Her name, we gotta shout her out. That's Dr. Raquel Martin.
Yes, and I follow her too. Okay, yes.
Raquel Martin, PhD. At Raquel Martin, PhD.
It's the fact that now these kids who are being spoken to this way, they know they're being put down. They know they're being insulted, and so why would they express themselves? Why would they engage in class? Now you've just shut them all down.
Well, like, there's two things. So one, I think about this in my day job. Like, the learning environment is first off, shout out to teachers. Like, being a teacher is a really challenging. Really, it's one of the most challenging professions you can have.
Yes,
because you are constantly giving. Like, it is almost a nonstop faucet of giving, and there's so many things that are required to have a fertile learning environment. So I want to stop short of being too critical, but as it pertains to this, like, this is an opportunity where the learning environment can give you feedback in a positive way. So really, what's the learning environment here? How can you take that slang and fit it into a structure? Like, if your issue is stylistic, okay, you can agree to disagree on style, because that's really what we're talking about. Like, we all have our own slang, and slang breaks down differently depending on where you are, like that just, but that's a function of style. So if that's the case, then why not, I would focus on, okay, stylistically, we don't see eye to eye, but here's how you put these things into structure so that when you are writing, it makes sense for you to say, but on God, bro. And the reader understands what you're saying, but that's a function of structure. And Christian, to your point about learning a different language, Arabic is my second language. And it blew my mind once I got past the rigor of formality and started speaking it, and hearing how, as someone once told me, it's a gateway into culture. Like, slang is a part of culture, and I'm not just talking about Black American culture, like, generally speaking,
that's
like,
everywhere. Yeah.
Everyone has it, and it is the informality. I mean, like, hell, when you read the Bible is written in Latin because that was the most approachable language that, or obviously the modern Bible with the New Testament, like, that's just the most approachable language that everyone could, like, everyone was educated enough to speak Greek, so it's just like, like, there's so many different ways that you can look at it historically. And for whatever reason, people just have this obsession, especially like with English. I don't know what it's like with French, even though it seems to me like French,
it's equally as intense. It's the same idea.
I mean,
there's literally a governing body of the French language in Paris that decides rules as they come up. Yeah.
Well, it's the same what Dr. Martin says. It's the same kind of imperial impulse. It's almost like purity. Like, the more clear and clean your language is, the more, like, the better it is. And like,
well, and that's a lot of what I learned in English growing up as a kid. And you guys might, I don't know, I got made fun of it even when I was younger, but you might have noticed that. I swear like a truck driver, but I don't really use a whole lot of informal speech aside from that. And I was watching a video, and it's not intentional. That's at this point, that's so ingrained. It is what it is. But I was watching a video clip before this one where it was sort of like a man on the street kind of quiz thing. It was students at I think it was at Oxford, and they were asking about that, like, why do we have to have these certain rules? Like, if you understand what I'm saying, to your point about the communications dance, John, like, does it matter? You hear what I'm saying, you understand it, you respond back to me, it makes sense to me. Like, we are communicating. What's the point? Is there are certain grammatical rules that you have to have in place, even at an unconscious level, just to have the conversation make sense, to have your sentences, your everything come together, right? Be comprehensible. But above and beyond that, is it about the facilitating communication, or is it about signaling your social status?
Oh, it is 100% the latter. Like, and if you even think, about, especially in the Black community, like, language is so fascinating. Like, growing up and, do I talk white? And then when you get a little bit older, if a lot of Black folks are really like, you use that to an advantage. Like, it is an indication of status. Like, I talk this way, you talk hood. Like, I'm better than you because my English sounds like this. I sound like the white kids. And that is a signal of, privileged status, even if it's completely meaningless. Like, you just making a choice how to talk. And at the same time, guys and gals that don't speak that same kind of language, it's the same thing. But, we'll go back to Obama for a second. I know, Aleem, you want to hop in. But I remember when Obama was at Reverend Wright's church with Trinity in Chicago, and he was at the church, and all of a sudden he's Martin Luther King Jr. on the microphone, and he's just got to, you kind of switch up your language. And as I've settled into adulthood, I've gotten real comfortable talking the way that I'm going to talk. Like, if you can read your audience, forget the code switching for a second. Like, if you can read your audience, you've got a couple of options. You can either be really serving and give them what you think that they want, or you can not. Like, you can have them kind of ascend to what it is that you're saying. And it again, that's just language. Like, we were just hanging out with Jay Finch this past weekend, and Jay says a whole bunch of stuff sometimes. I'll be like, Jay, that sounds really smart. I don't know what you're talking about, man. Like, man, what are we doing here? Like, I don't get it.
Lingo. But no, my experience is kind of unique as well, similar to yours, Christian, is that I never have.
Cuss like a sailor?
I'm sorry?
What's that? You cuss like a sailor? That's what you're doing.
No, I never use cuss words, and I never really use slang very. That's not my comfort zone. Now, people listen to me think, oh, well, he must have come from a certain different community. No. My community was speaking is slang-filled language as you could possibly imagine, but it just, for me, because, again, maybe just because who I am, my personality, my upbringing, whatever it may be, I said, I'm more comfortable in a certain style of speaking, in a certain style of articulating my thoughts. My friends and people around me, my peers, they just knew, okay, that's Aleem, right? That's he's going to just
That's just you.
There were elements of the language that was being spoken around me that I did adopt and absorb. My family wasn't all speaking like me. Maybe my brother, because we came from the same place. But my aunts and uncles on both sides, some of them were deep South, some of them were, South Jersey. So I was surrounded by all of this different style of language. So it's all a part of me. And at times I'll evolve or I'll wind up in certain ways. And John out on chat and how that may happen because it's a familiarity to me, and it's still a comfort zone to some extent, as long as I can go right back to where my core, I guess. So I guess my point is that for me, it's not necessarily, and this is actually an interesting point that you bring that up, John, about and Christian, about what is it signaling. So I'll come back to that point, but Ebonics, right? That conversation's been going on for about 50 years, right? Is that something that we should accept and acknowledge as a new language or part of the language or dialect or something to that effect? As a youth, I used to really abhor that notion, right? Like, why are we trying?
You had to say that you abhor it. You had to go above and beyond just to look, thumb your nose down.
The point is that I was like, Well, why would we embrace the effect of our enslavement, right? Of our oppression, which basically starved us of the our educational opportunities to actually learn the language in its completeness. We were stripped of that. We weren't given that opportunity, and what we developed was just ways to communicate with what we had, right? So why are we celebrating our oppression? I looked at it as celebrating our oppression in a way, right? It is like we were kept in the dark on this. We were kept away from this knowledge, and now we're going to try to embrace that. So it's like I didn't really appreciate that, in that way. Now, as I evolved over the years, I said, okay, well, I sort of understand we don't want to. We're not looking down upon each other. We certainly don't want to look down upon each other and down upon that history. But at the same time, I still feel the same way. Is that it's not something. It is a part of us, and we're not throwing it away. But at the same time, we have to say, okay, this was the result of something being done to us that was not so good. So let's be able to do both.
Not so good, John. What is that? 5 now?
5. Aleem is
picked up by
probably 5.
Right? We got it picked up by.
if I could jump in, I mean, like the
you guys are making it work. Look, I'm the one doing Christian's dropping F-bombs. I got to hold it together, right?
But I think, Aleem, the discussion and the debate. So one, I think language is currency, like it's cultural currency, and I'm guilty of this too. As I was saying earlier, like the way that I can speak is a way for me to signal to especially to white folks, perhaps that, I'm safe, like I'm not like them. And I've been told that by brown folks and by white folks, like there is, when I was younger, like there's like you're not like the other ones. And maybe at some point in my life, like, oh, okay, like I'll take that as a compliment because that's what I aspire to be. Like I am not like them. But the reason that you don't want to be like, quote unquote, them is that you also don't want to get sucked into the vortex of history. Like there's so many things that as a people we are victimized of or been victimized. We have been victimized. Like you don't want to get like, I don't want to have, I don't want to get a girl pregnant when I'm a teenager. I don't want to be a deadbeat dad. I don't blah, blah, like all of these negative tropes in the Black community. And it's so interesting how they get whittled down to the way that you speak. Like the way that you speak communicates that I'm not any of that, and I'm going to pursue a certain education because I'm not like them. But I'll go back to another professor I said once to me said, like, John, what's the difference between you and your brother from North Philly? I'm like, I don't know, Dr. Cato, what? Nothing. Like if you get pulled over, no one knows how you speak. No one knows how you look. You are you. Aleem, if you get pulled over right now, you're just a black man with a fitted and a beard.
Yeah.
And like that's the reality. And that's the reality of where we live. So, if you can free yourself from this idea that your language is going to keep you from, X, Y, and Z, well, then you can also realize that, no, it's going back to what Dr. Martin was talking about, this thing, then you can see how like this is just, colonial currency.
Mm-hmm.
Like the closer you are to us, the better you are. And that is what I can reject. And that's why it's like, I'm not necessarily saying that I want to use Ebonics because I don't even know. If you ask me like, what's the structure of Ebonics, I don't know it, but at the same way, like I wouldn't know what Gullah Geechee is either. Mm-hmm. Like that's a Creole language. And it is a language that is created because there's an absence of resources. Like, I think it's incredible. Mm-hmm. Like, you can still figure out a language and a way to communicate when it's not given to you, when you can't write, I strive to free myself from, like, kind of these systems of confusion. Mm-hmm. Like, if I want to use slang, if I want to call you a nigga, like, that's what I do. And I'm cool with it, as you did to me this past weekend. Or if Christian is like, yo, let me tell you about this motherfucking sword fight. Like, that's like, okay, that's appropriate for the way that we're talking. Like, that's how we communicate. Now, the issue that the teacher could have also said is, like, you need to understand context. Like, because that's the way that you like to communicate with your friends in this very narrow area. That doesn't mean that anyone's going to understand what you're saying. like if someone comes onto you and like, as far as I'm concerned, like, on God, like I don't even remember. I feel like that's a New York thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's been around.
That's a New York thing. Like back in the day, like if someone says like, yo, on God, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, we're to God. Oh, okay. But it's something like John in Philly. Like I don't use the word. Like I can't use the word, but it's like, that's the joint. And like it's not. That's the thing. It's like you get it, but if you were talking to somebody in the 70s or the 80s in Philly and they say, yo, give me that joint right there, you're like, what did you say? But this one really makes total sense. So, I'm done on that because I know that we got some other things we want to cover before we wrap up. But
no, I gotta wrap up. I've been up since 4:30, gentlemen. I gotta call it a night. It is 10 o'clock. But
wrap this joint up.
Exactly. I mean, it was not even for a good reason. I mean, I got a lot done, but I woke up at like 4 something. I just have been up for the whole day, so it's been a long work day, been a long Monday. But it's been an excellent conversation.
I like arranging it well.
I do want to say we do, before we wrap though, we have to do one last thing and say one last happy birthday to John,
the old man.
Had an amazing birthday get together this weekend. Not on a podcast, not on the computer, but in real life, in person.
I really actually, as we were at the spot, I was wishing that we actually did have microphones and we were chatting.
I was going to say, if we had a bunch of these mics on, the arms and a bunch of cameras, I mean, like that. Yeah. I mean, that conversation.
Like we're going to have to bring that up again because it was like
that's a
it was everything. I'll put it like this: like you two are some of my dearest friends, and I go to all of my dear friends for different reasons, and it's the rare occasion when all the people that I go to that are really a place of like comfort and security and brotherhood. It's rare that everyone is in the same place at the same time, even more so when it's just the guys. And like, we all, all love our families, but there's something about, just the guys like getting together and just, it was dope. Not everyone smokes cigars, but, it was ironic that it was a smoke-filled back room. Shout out to Preston and Cassidy. Like,
the inflammation in my lungs the next day was rough.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, I've done it before. Listen, before everything switched to no smoking, I had to endure this in pool halls and whatever else.
Yeah.
No, tobacco was very popular.
That was.
I'll put it like
that. That was an amazing group of guys, John. You've got a rare group of friends to bring together like that. So, I mean, I was thinking, we talked about everything from taking care of family and parenting to finances to the law to history. I mean, I was thinking about that conversation ever since.
Here's the dope thing, and this is, for all of our listeners, man. The great thing about y'all is that I don't feel like there are limitations on what we can discuss and what we cover. Like, that's what's really exciting. Like I can remember idealizing like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and the Inklings. Like in my mind, they just would get together in a pub and have a conversation, and there's no limits on what they could really think about or what they could cover. Science, philosophy, theology, history. Like there was nothing that was off limits. I mean, they just happened to be great writers. But like, I'm not saying that we're the Inklings, but like I love the feeling like there's nothing that we can't discuss, test, talk. We can be Socratic or we can be idiots. Like and it's all the same. Like it's amazing.
Yeah.
So I feel very blessed, very fortunate that I have such an incredible crew of men that are just my guys.
Oh.
Well, thank you for inviting us and including us and having us be part of that group. Definitely left that evening feeling,
Enlightened.
Enlightened. Yeah, I was gonna say, just for folks to understand, it wasn't like some crazy party. I mean, there was animated conversation. It was great, but I mean, I've been reflecting on what we talked about like later that night, yesterday, today. I mean, it's stuck with me. So thank you.
Well, the thing that also, and like I definitely want to cover this in pod, and then we will cover it in a pod in the future. But the one piece that stuck out to me was having the cognitive capacity. I forget the term of art that we actually use, but there's only so much thinking and processing that the brain can do.
Right.
And getting some more distance, and just being intentional about how you rest, how you enjoy, how you recover. Because we're not automatons. Like you should enjoy life. Like it's short.
Yeah.
We're talking about that as well. So
yeah.
It was actually, to be honest, it's one of the best birthdays I've ever had.
Good.
And that's no knock. I mean, last year, we got together for 40, and I really appreciate y'all putting together that last year. But like, I can't describe. I'm in a better place in life than I was last year. Like I was sharing, I was going through like anxiety attacks daily. Like I had a pretty bad one on the way to dinner last year. And, this year I'm so much healthier, and just to be able to just enjoy just those 3 or so hours, with the guys is precious. So
awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Anyway.
Well, let's end with that then. Happy birthday.
Yeah.
Thank you guys both. Great episode. Great talk.
Like, subscribe.
Do it again soon. All the requisite liking, clicking, sharing, all that good stuff.
Hey man, also shout out to the trolls. I don't remember what pod we had, but shout out to the trolls. Appreciate y'all for upping our viewership.
Oh yeah, the trolls. Yes. We had a bunch on that reel. Yeah,
like,
that was funny.
Talk about just being triggered. It was like, hey guys.
Yeah. Well, they love to throw in that term snowflake, and I think snowflake is a great term to describe somebody who is white, fragile, and falls apart under a little bit of heat or pressure. So,
do you? I mean, like, look, we've been on we had like not even a dozen, maybe not even a dozen episodes. Like, how do you? I mean, I guess it's hashtagging, but like, how much time are you spending just looking at the internet?
I was gonna say, like, seriously, like, it takes like the biggest podcasts out there didn't even like get a following until like 150, 200 episodes and a whole bunch of, and still it just like episode whatever that was, like 7. Like, oh, okay, well, we struck a nerve. Thank you. You just got more views for us, so it's fine.
Hilarious.
All right.
On that note, all right, guys. Thank you.
Right.
See ya.
Take it easy.